Recording. All right. Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is a show where we talk about the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. Today, it's sort of interesting. Like, I've had this back catalog of work that I've been going through, and finally, I have Jason Collins on the show.
Hey, how's it going, dude?
Yeah, so he has probably one of the more energetic voices in the realm of heroclix. You and Symbio are really energetic. I also called her from whatchamacallit, Dial H. I'm tired. I've been up since
it's 9 o'clock here, 8 o'clock there. It's been a long day, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been up since 4 in the morning, and yeah, that's a story right there. So anyway, I had Jason on because I think it was like last year when you introduced the concept of the prime tax.
Yeah, about the time the discussion about Jakeem and other primes started really picking up.
So I was like, man, we need to talk about this. And I thought this was going to be like a Married with Clicks conversation because it was on his show. And then we were bantering back and forth, and then like all our schedules sort of went to crap. And then he hit me up. He's like, yo, let's talk about this. And I'm like, yes, let's talk about this. So what we're going to do is primarily hypothetical, and the main reason that we're having this conversation is to help you try to figure out, is the piece worth its total all cost in theory? And again, this is like hypothetical stuff, and it makes you sort of look at stuff a little bit differently and maybe ask yourself, is this a good prime? Is this not a good prime? And so on and so forth. So you said you expanded your idea of the prime tax. So go ahead and lay it out for everybody.
Well, the initial idea of the prime tax is when you pay for a prime, you're getting a discount to a certain degree. And that discount, of course, is I have to commit to a single prime on my team. And so they're going to drop the points on that a little bit. That was the initial idea. Now, I actually went a little further with it, did a little bit of digging, watched design for the past couple of sets. It's been more my focus since Uncanny X-Men, because that's where they announced they were starting a lot of their major changes, or at least that's where they said in a meeting that we're talking about doing this, and so that's where I've been focusing my attention. And it's not solely a prime tax anymore. Actually, it's a rarity tax, in that the less rare your figure is, the more unnecessary costs they hide in the background somewhere. Now, of course, we all know, nobody knows except for the people who work at WizKids, that there is some kind of formula that goes into points and everything like that.
I know probably about 80% of it.
Yeah, I'm sure I could probably try to dig in the mathematics, and then there's a 20% that is made up, I'm sure. And we can't get into that, I'm sure.
It's the problem comes in is like historically, and I'm just saying this, if this is quote unquote the same formula that's been used since the dawn of heroclix, which I doubt, but let's just say hypothetically it is, from the old conversations from multiple developers, I would say is this: your commons pay full points for all their powers and abilities.
Yeah.
It gets decreased per rarity. Classically, in the end, the highest rarity was a unique. Then that formula got shifted from uniques to super rares, and then from super rares to chases, and then chases to ultra chases. Right. You pay more for certain power combinations. Now, what those values are, I don't know. But I do know that Running Shot Pulse Wave is a lot more expensive than Running Shot Psychic Blast, and Running Shot Psychic Blast is way more expensive than Running Shot Energy Explosion. Okay. Yeah,
and that makes a degree of sense if you look at the straight up strength of the power. But I'm sure at one point they didn't realize that Running Shot Pulse Wave needed to be as expensive as it is, say, in the current day. And that's made from observation and change. The collectible games all spend a lot of time morphing.
But the only last thing I know is anything that's like magical traits in which they do all sorts of wacky stuff, that's all snowballed. The only way that you can definitively say, like, hey, something is in a trait or in a power and it's cheaper or more expensive than its other version, is does it do more or less, or more limited or less limited than the default counterpart? That's all I know from talking to people and listening to devs for over 10 years talk about the game. So that's about it. so go ahead and explain a little bit more and in your theory here.
Yeah. So when we go back to where primes first kind of came out, when they first came out, they seemed neato for the most part, but there was only for the most part one in each set that kind of stood out most of the time. In Batman, it was the World's Greatest Detective, or the super rare prime in that case.
That one.
Yeah.
Also, the Hush Bruce Wayne wasn't bad, but I'm a medic person.
Yeah. Well, if you come from the 15 years of heroclix, at some point you played medics as a mandatory thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was as mandatory as a possessor back in the day. So. Yeah. It's like, got a possessor? Yeah. All right. Back then it was, you got a perplexer, got an outwitter, got a what's it called? A medic. And it was those three, and it was always the same three. It was always like either the rookie paramedic or the Jane Foster because you're rich. And the con artist for your perplex, and the 27-point Black Panther was your outwit. So. Or
DEO agent if you weren't able to access the con artist. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So. Where were we here? And so when primes kind of showed up on the market, the first iteration of them was, here they are. This is a thing. We didn't understand why they couldn't be on the same team, and we never were until we got more and more of them. So then you get into the realm of Spider-Man, which is, if you ask me, probably the best set of primes that they've made. I think at least 3 out of the 4 were like super playable. Like you had Brother Voodoo, you had Alyosha Craven, and you had super rare prime Hobgoblin.
Hobgoblin, I'll let you switch. That might be local tech. That never took off where I was at, but
it was. I wouldn't say it was defining the game, but it was definitely playable.
Yes, I'll give you that.
Hannibal King, less so, but that was the common prime. And then as we kind of went on, we started to see why it probably wasn't such a good idea to be allowed to have 2 primes on the same team. So then you look at the primes, and Brother Voodoo was the most requested, I think, to be on the watch list. And the one time he ended up on the watch list, they didn't change him because they changed the Heroes for Hire. But it got me thinking, why is he what he is? And Brother Voodoo, I think, is where I started to see the prime tax. Because he's what, 79 points? You get the full move and then mind control with him. But it's still kind of limited in the fact that, he can mind control. If the guy's got battle free, he doesn't. That's a big here to there.
He's also when mind control was GIMP, and nobody really liked mind control because of the feedback penalty and it being a power action. And he functionally changed it by it being free, and and I think he had 2 targets. So go ahead.
And he was super functional, and he was ridiculously low cost. He wasn't a deep dial. I think he was like 6 or 7 clicks.
6 clicks.
But at the same time, he was one focus to this character: mind control the guy, do something to your opponent's team with him, or get him out of a position, and then either maybe capitalize on poison, maybe capitalize on smoke cloud if you're lucky. But that was really what he did. But he did it really well.
Yes.
Like no ifs, ands, or buts. Brother Voodoo did what he did, and he did it very well. And you see people, get on the watch list, and you think to yourself, why does Brother Voodoo have to be on the watch list? Yeah, he's cheap, but he's cheap because he's the only prime allowed in your team. If I choose another one of these super useful primes, like let's say I wanted to come up with some weird tech that involved Alyosha Craven and Brother Voodoo, I couldn't do it, right? And then as more and more sets started adding more and more to the prime pool, I found myself often colliding with teams. It's like, oh, I'm going to put this character on here. Oh, who's got that keyword? This guy. Oh, I can't put the Cheetah Prime on the same team as Alyosha because they're both primes.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. So the one thing before, when we were going back and forth on the prime tax, is the idea of game design limiting what you can and cannot play in power combinations in an attempt to keep elements of the game balanced while attempting to diversify it as well. And I thought the problem comes in with the prime tax is that you then introduce other realms of uniqueness that are also super powerful, that are also unique among themselves.
That's
but
right.
There's nothing stopping you from playing a prime and then a title character and then another unique character. And in that, I feel like, in particular with title characters, I know there's a whole mechanic behind it, but personally I felt like, well, title characters should be locked behind primes. And the main reason they should be locked behind primes is so that you don't have a chance of leaking a title ability with a really strong prime ability, and then that being something overwhelming. In which, in all honesty, we're probably more going to see that in Golden Age than Modern Age. But having played like 1,000-point Golden Age game, I could tell you it's really, really, really stupid when I have Title Thor, a couple of leaderships, that one Penguin, and then Jakeem Thunder. Like you can say, like, Edward, that wasn't most of your points. I'm like, it was enough once Title Thor got to max plot points, and I was able to stall out. And and that's part of the frustration that I guess most of the people that I played against had, was I didn't do anything with Title Thor in that game except build up plot points. And once that happened, the global effect of Thor, and then add in Jakeem Thunder and Unimind and a couple of other pieces that shall not be named, it was just too much. And I took on a whole crew of kaiju. That's how stupid this game was. And I was not even the most expensive team.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just saying, it's like, all in all, like, I feel like when you start adding title effects with the uniqueness of primes, and if they come up with something else, then you're eventually just going to have to ask yourself, why aren't these just under one category?
Yeah, I don't 100% disagree with that. I have minor disagreements with it. Mostly in the fact that title characters themselves do actually 100% of the time come with their own downside in addition to being their own uniqueness. Because when these guys die, they mess your team up.
Yes, and see, and this is one thing with the newer title characters that I've noticed. Like, I think it's Thor forward, they're like lingering effects.
Yeah.
And there goes my phone. They're lingering effects. They're not like, for the next turn, you're just sort of screwed. It's
it's for the rest of the game,
you're sort of screwed.
Yeah. You watch your opponent beat you down.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the elements that come in. But I also think as long as that continues, title characters stay balanced. But if I look at like title Deadpool, I'm like, you're not balanced. Like,
no.
You just give me something annoying for a turn, and then that's gone, and that's it. If I'm able to survive that turn, there's no penalty for me losing you. And I wouldn't even say that title Deadpool is the strongest of all the title characters. But go ahead.
Well, Title Deadpool brought up a conversation back when we were talking. Me and Tom were regularly on the Metal Lab. I oftentimes, when my team of guys there all get along with each other, I try to play devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. And it was impossible to devil's advocate the cost behind the Deadpool. He was 75 points. Regardless of anything else he did, that dial was stupid.
No, the dial's stupid, but in particular, the whole purpose of Deadpool was to create a proxy threat of Nighthawk Prime, which you're then asking yourself, are titles inherently as good as primes, or should titles just go ahead and replace primes? Because if I'm comparing a character that is a equivocal title comparison Nighthawk Prime is cheaper and better all day. It doesn't matter that, Deadpool is a okay attacker, because Nighthawk Prime was an okay attacker. I mean, when you start, measuring cost and other things like that, like the two pieces don't add up. But the only thing I can say is that game design realized that a constant game-wide effect, not even an aura, a constant game-wide effect without cost was too much, and that it dominated too hard. Like Isaac showed us at Rocktober, like, you can win with this piece. And because up to that point, I mean, I think that Rocktober was the first, the first major tournament win for that figure, or first championship win. And I don't think it showed up at Origins the following year.
No, I mean, it definitely wasn't winning. It was on the occasional team, but it wasn't dominating. It wasn't a dominant force. In fact, right out of the gates, I think it was the Shield teams that were dominating for a little while. Nick Fury and friends, as it were.
Yeah, but then it comes back and it wins Rocktober last year.
Yeah.
So I guess just Nighthawk Prime is magical at Rocktober. But that's the thing that I see is when we look at like a global effect, a prime is more unbalanced than a title. And you can say, well, we got a shift in game design. But I really doubt when Nighthawk Prime was designed, someone was like, yeah, we're eventually going to make Unimind. And even more so, I don't think they understood the impact that Nighthawk Prime shut down a ton of core powers. Like, they don't work.
Yeah, core powers and just every mechanic we expect to use in the game.
Yeah.
We don't come with the stats on the figures expecting to use those. We bring other things. We bring other things for that.
we want more than the stats on figures.
Yeah, it's like the figures are just holding spots for getting stats up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but I'm more, and this is what I want to pick your brain about.
Yeah.
Okay, and this really is more of the crux of what I was playing around with my head. All right, so we have title characters. What should their wall be for the game? Because I know that they're based off of, was it Path something on Magic? Planeswalkers. I know they're based off of Planeswalkers. Yep. But what should be the scaling for them? Because I don't want to see some insanely high wall get walked over like Attack on Titan. And it's like, oh, hey, guess what? I am Title Thanos, destroyer of the universe, looking over the wall, and play that theme music. And then it's like, well, it's fine because he's a title. And then if he dies, your opponent has -2 stats for the rest of the game. I don't want to deal with that when Thanos has like title power, +1, bring your second highest character right next to Thanos as a free action. I don't want to deal with that. What do you think should be the wall, or at least some box that we should try to put that title characters should be placed in? Not that they are, but they should be placed in.
I do, like, before I answer this, as you mentioned, they're similar to Planeswalkers. I feel like WizKids watches my show sometimes and hears me when I say pay attention to what they do in Magic. Guys, I mean when we're talking about competitive play, don't copy game design, because the game design doesn't match up in this case. Because one thing I want to point out before I get into where we should draw a line is like what level of character should be a title character, is that the Planeswalkers in Magic, when you use your ultimate ability, you're probably about to lose that character. Like that card is about to die off of the board, and you're probably going to get that big effect that's lingering. But now I've lost that. I've had to sacrifice that thing, and I put it out and everything like that. But getting outside of the mechanics of Magic, talking about the game of HeroClix, you're right. We shouldn't be having god-level characters as title characters. We should be sticking to, our known favorite comic book characters that don't hit God. Like, I honestly think Thor was a bit of an overreach, but at the same time, Thor has his own comic book, so does kind of deserve it. And I think a long-running comic book character deserves their run, but when I say long-running, I mean synonymous with the property, right? So when you think Marvel, you think Hulk, Spider-Man, Captain America, Wolverine. Those are the characters that come to mind. And those are the types of characters that could be title characters. And the Hulk, they've been getting better with design of the Hulk for sure, as in making him playable, but at the same time recognizing the fact that, magical poopty poop's going to shoot him out of the sky and somebody's going to outsmart him and take away and open him up for a sucker punch. But it definitely should never. If I see a title Galactus, that's an overreach for sure. Or you see a title Thanos, like you said. I think they should always be a center point to a team, but never the entirety of the team. If that makes sense. So like, we should never have a 300-point title character, but they should be, when you commit to a title character, you kind of have to commit to making your team make that work. I think Thor was a close example because he's got that ability to bring Asgardians next to him, which also made for some shenanigans when I used him in conjunction with, I think it was a common Captain America from Mighty Thor. I hypersonic, attack you, go -2 on my plot points. Oh, hey, Cap's here to flurry charge you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but, I had to build a team with that in mind, and I think that has to continue with title characters. Like, that has to be a thing where I say, like, Deadpool, like you said, he was Nighthawk Prime Light.
Yeah.
That was an experiment. Cute experiment. Never do that again.
Yeah, and see, and that's where I somewhat am personally landing right now, because in the back of my mind, what's going on is this. WizKids is coming in and giving me figures and then telling me how to play as well. And I'm like, no, that's not your job to tell me how to play. Then it's like, well, we need to sell things, but we realize that we need more overpowered things in a set. And to have more overpowered things in a set, we have to limit on how many of these overpowered things can you play together. And so I sort of like look back at that and I'm like, oh, okay. Like, even like we're dealing with currently with the Space Knights. So you have technically characters that are prime Space Knights, but they're not prime, they're unique, so that you can play them with the Space Knights because they got rid of ATAs.
Yeah.
Okay. That simple little, like, we just made an ATA, allow them to play together, that would have worked. But, they made them all unique, which makes you ask the question is, what's really the role of the Prime, if not to create false rarity, and then to justify false rarity, here's some mediocre power creep on some of these characters. And again, that was my thought process from the beginning. Now I'm more so concerned in particular is that when I look at primes, the prime idea is like, yes, these characters come in cheaper and have better stats, powers, but they have no traits. Or they have adequate stats, powers, adequate stats and powers and bonkers traits. And I'm more scared of bonkers traits than, oh, this guy comes in too cheap. When a guy comes in too cheap, that's fine. But if I can, like, punch you and you can't attack next turn, and then I can go and punch somebody else, in that same turn, and that's my trait, like, because I'm a prime, I'm like, yeah, that's a bit crazy. That's a bit too much. And even if I hate to say Jakeem is the main lightning rod when we look at this, but Jakeem got to be Super Skrull for cheaper without having zombie resurrection in the penalty of rolling.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like when you look at that, and I remember when I was hearing the conversations about, like, is Jakeem better than Super Skrull, and a lot of people were like, look, Super Skrull stats are weaker than Jakeem and all this other stuff. And I'm like, look. Don't get it twisted. Jakeem's good, but he's not Super Skrull. Because Jakeem can't kill your army, bring it back from the dead, and then say it works for you.
Yeah.
Like,
and then not die when you attack back.
Right. And find some way to take away a pulse wave because reasons. You know, he's not that stupid, but if you look at stats and pound for pound, Jakeem has way better stats. Like, way better stats than Super Skrull. So it would take a lot more to pump up a mid to late dial Super Skrull than it did a Jakeem. Yep. But at that same time, if you're mid to late dial Super Skrull, you've probably already started the zombie horde. So, like, force-wise, they're about equal. And that's me saying a super rare prime in comparison to a chase.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, okay, we in our mind, we already equate a super rare prime to a chase anyway.
Yeah.
In terms of power level. But that was, like, one of my first points. I was like, well, if game design decides that we're just going to put the bonker stuff inside of primes, then teams, they're not looking at balance at that point. They're looking at, like, what sells, and that's going to be more of an issue than making sure that the prime system is actually designed and works. But go ahead if you have a rebuttal.
Well, I don't have a rebuttal. I have a jumping point to pile on with you on.
Okay.
Is at the same time I started all this research and discussion, they were saying that they're going to reduce complexity of lower common characters and increase complexity on higher level characters. But then they stopped remembering how to make good non-complex characters. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, we have characters in the common slot who aren't good. And they're simple to understand. They're also overcosted in comparison to higher rarities, right? So
yeah, they're like, I look at Elseworlds as the last love letter to players. Well, and it's like, hey, are you on a budget? You can play commons and uncommons and do okay.
Yeah.
You know, like, here's this Green Lantern, kids. It'll be great. This common Green Lantern. Like, when you move and you roll a d6 and you roll a 5 or 6, some of your guys can attack after you carry them. And you're like, yay! Thank you, game design. You know? And I think my gripe on Starting Over Podcast has been for a while is your 001 should be the main staple of the set for your average player. And if you look back to the Superman set, it's not like it's impossible. 150-point Superman that was just good. He wasn't broken. He wasn't insane. He wasn't
complicated.
Yeah, he wasn't complicated either. He was just like, look, man, I'm like, 6 clicks, 150 points, but you give me hypersonic speed, super strength, and a heavy object, and I kill you, and I have outwit. Like, that was functional. Like, you had Worlds teams that were like, Fast Forces Superman at 150 that has prob, and then that 150-point common Superman. Like, that team is highly accessible. And when I look at most of the figures now that are highly accessible, the better ones are just support pieces.
Yeah.
You know, like with X-Men in particular, I even though I did win a WKO using Common Cyclops, I know some of you about, like, you're going to talk so much smack on him, and I'm like, sort of am. Just give me a moment. 001 Cyclops is okay, but he's not a character that I'm going to be like, yo, I have 4 of these things. That's a value. Okay? Ex-trainee and ex-student, they're not bad. And I did a whole show about low point characters, and they can surprise you. But the average player, when they see those in the booster, they're like, crap, I got one of these. Yeah. I'm not playing that unless I have to. Moya McTaggart, by far, is the most brokenest 25 points I've seen in a long while.
Yep.
in a long while. And that's me giving them a hand clap, okay? All right? Same thing with Hellion. Hellion's really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at, well, and Mystique is your mileage may vary. But like if you look at the rest of the commons, it's just sort of crap. You know, like it's not good. Like as much as you want Celeste and Mindy and Phoebe to be great, they're not. And don't get me in on Sync, because that dude, that was my character back in the day. He was my Gen X character. But like when you start, you continue that look through, and you see like, all right, you go back to your common prime. That Moira McTaggart prime, not that bad. You look at Magneto Prime, in context of the set, he's sort of stupid. In context of the set. Like, he's sort of stupid, because if you pull 2 Moyas in that Magneto Prime, you're one-shotting things.
Yeah. Everything in the set is dying to
Yeah, you're one-shotting things. You're just praying you don't run into a Professor X. That's it. Like, I think that's one of the only things that just comes in and ruins your day completely. But you know, like when you start looking at these, most of these figures, it's like, all right, who else is good? Leech. Why is he good? Because he has a special power. That's why. If you look at any of the rest of the characters in the commons and uncommons, it's like, why are they good? Because they have a special power.
Yeah, they have something that makes what they have not matter. It does something completely different.
Yeah. So I don't see the problem that I feel like title characters should be more like, and I initially I had this view, because I talked to people, well, longtime listeners know I used to be like a top 50 player in a game called Altil. I don't even know if it's still going on or not. I left that game a long time ago. But what they did in terms of game design, and it's a card game, but it's like a card game in which you place the card down, and then there's like 3 lanes, and characters have certain reach, and then different characters can only hit certain spots on the map and on the board and whatnot. But the thing I liked is, like, you had like your light deck, and you had characters that would be boosted up when the sun was up. So you had sunlight, night, and dusk. Okay, and so if you played the light faction, and you played pure light, and I forgot what they were called. Your lower level guys got boosted when the sun was up. So every third turn, you would get a boost, whether it's like this power unlocks or you get the free draw or whatever. Okay. But then in the higher rarity of the sets are characters that are like, look, man, I make it forever day. That character in and of itself its stats were crap, but its effect was broken. So you had like forever day. So then at the other end is you had like zombie werewolves craps for like the night faction. And so again, when it was night, they couldn't die. Like they would just keep taking damage and damage and damage, but they wouldn't die. And when it's day or dusk, they could die. So every third turn, they were just this unstoppable wall for their front line. But then, of course, just like there was a Forever Day character, there was a Forever Night character. Again, stats sucked, but again, that Forever Night character's rarity was really high. And what I haven't seen WizKids do effectively is say, look, here's all your common characters. They have these cool traits and these abilities. Now, when you start combining them with your super rares or your title characters or your primes or whatever, look, now these cool effects come out. But instead, what we get is, hey, these cool effects come out no matter what. Da-dun-dun. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas I would love it. It's like, okay, like Title Thor, we bring it up. Mm-hmm. Title Thor is more thematic for Asgardians than really he is for Avengers. And it would be great if Title Thor just had this, like, his +1 instead of freaking rain down the lightning was all other Asgardians on the field get +1 attack +1 defense because Thor's here. It's like it's called like raise morale.
Right.
You know, and he hit, and then you can even say it if he hits and lands with an attack this turn, you can also increase +1 damage. Boom! Like, how many people would love that?
Enough to actually make Asgardian teams.
Yeah, or more Asgardian teams. And same thing with like Cap, like the new Cap. It's like why don't he just has like, I have a leadership. And if I roll leadership, you know, I roll leadership this turn, you know, I take tokens off of everybody and I double push or something like whatever, you know, like he takes on all the responsibility. Like there's cool things where I feel like title characters should shift from being, hey, look at me, I'm about to do something broken once I get my last title point, to, hey, look at me, I synergize with this theme and I make it competitive. And then primes could still be like, look at me, I'm broke. But I don't feel right now that title characters have a legit point and reason to be in this game functionally, other than to rip off a mechanic from another game.
I don't disagree with that, for sure. Like, when I saw the Deadpool, so many things went through my mind. It was just like, why? But why? Okay, but where did all this decision making come from? Why is this like it's a super rare that's got this like there's complexity and then there's the plot points. It you know, let's add this extra level, force a lot of reading that is generally only like there's so much lawyer speaking game rules, it's ridiculous. It's like, in order to do this, we got to make sure that you don't do this as well. Anyway, but then they don't. Like, they seem to be just arbitrary effects for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, why Deadpool has that -2 effect? Why specifically does he have that -2 effect? I even question Thor's ability to bring in an Asgardian. That's a Heimdall kind of thing. Right? You know? And
right. That's a good point.
Right? And, I mean, the Doctor Strange, I think, was close, but at the same time, not quite there. I mean, he's got that reroll on his ultimate. He's got extra damage. He's kind of making a bunch of people better. It's kind of Doctor Strangey. And then, you know, there's Joker and Harley, who are their own world.
The Joker and Harley are jokes in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And just to me, it's like, if you look at the conversation on primes, no one talks about them. No one. But let's look at, like, one of the limitations that they have is, like, they can't be called in or replaced. And I thought that was actually pretty good. And the main reason I thought that was pretty good is that you can call in prime characters from ID cards. I know enough people that have called in primes and been like, hey, check this out. Boom.
Hey, Peggy, what's up?
Yeah, Peggy Carter. Here we go. And I mean, before she got nerfed, I mean, Peggy Carter was like one of your prime characters that you called in on Shield level 7. It's like, oh, I need to get rid of your shape change and your stealth. There you go.
I don't have 120 points on my team for Nick Fury. Here's his reasonable sister.
Yeah. You know, like, and that was the thing that I looked at, was like, well, this is sort of unsettling, but it took your prime slot on the sideboard, and that was fine. But they sort of, I think they realized, like, oh no, we can't.
People are going to do this if you let this happen.
Oh yeah, like definitely Title Thor. Like, imagine a Golden Age game with Title Thor, where you were able to bring him in with a Thor ID card, and then be like, oh hey, bring down the lightning. You know? Yeah.
Just for a turn. It's like, here's now there's no damage depletion modifier. Here's 8 damage.
Yeah.
Cost me 5 points. Hope you enjoy it.
Oh gosh, that's something I really wish WizKids didn't do, but oh man, when they lost that damage depletion modifier, they were like, well, we have to make the game more simpler, and I'm like, do you know why you put that rule in there?
Do you remember half-range hypersonic? Do you know why you did that?
Yeah. It's like there's these things, and then they're like, wait. We left it for team bases. And it's like, the one thing that's really not as scary with it now. Yeah. But okay, you left it for team bases.
You left it for team bases, and then they did it to team bases with Ghost Rider anyway.
Yeah. So let's sort of push forward. So I'll say this, like, with everything that you've looked at with title characters and primes, and how much we pay for them, is how would a player best look at and evaluate a prime or a title character and say, like, yeah, this is what I need to be looking at, or I should run this?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, it's generally what is my team doing when you make that decision with every character, right?
Yeah.
But when you're choosing a prime, you have to look at it and say, is this the prime that is going to do what I need it to do? Now, post-rotation, we're going to have 2 sets or like four sets, not including small sets, that actually have no primes, which is a weird factor. Like when we rotate, we go down to Spider-Man. So Spider-Man has primes, Joker's Wild has primes, Avengers Defenders War doesn't, Deadpool does, Elseworlds and What If don't. Harley Quinn does. X-Men does, but then we also have a third set, Avengers Infinity, which is not going to have primes either. But we still have a sizable pool of primes to look at. I think they're all different enough for the most part that the decision is a lot easier to make in Modern. When you start to include all the primes in the team, or in the conversation, that's when your decision gets harder and harder. Golden Age Animal teams, you're using Alyosha. Don't question me. Just trust me. Trust Edward. He knows. Yeah. But then that's you look at that and say, unless you have another animal that you're going to use that effect on, that's it. Brother Voodoo works everywhere and anywhere. But then, does he add to your team what you need, or is he going to be off on his own, mind control one guy, do something stupid, and then die? These are questions you ask with any character. Is it worth it for me to only be allowed this one Green Ring character out of all the Green Ring characters that I can pick? Is this the one that does my thing? To put it in kind of your vernacular, is does he do it for me?
Yeah. And that's the one thing where I definitely like come back, and when I looked at the prime system is I look at my prime more than not to fill a role,
right?
And then I want my prime to say, like, all right. Most of the time when I've looked at it, I've said, like, I am getting this on the cheap, or I'm getting this because it's ridiculous. And so I've always balanced that on, I'm underpaying, or this is the only way I'm going to get this stupid effect. And my problem lately has been understanding that as I start the build, if I start the build with a prime, knowing that I cannot add in other prime options. And I can't even look at the other prime options. And I think that was one of the main things that allowed me to sort of tilt off last year around Mighty Thor and mispredict, because I was so used to thinking about Jakeem as the prime that I didn't think about Nighthawk Prime as the prime. And so it can leave you, if you stay in that realm of staying with primarily, when you start with a prime, then it can immediately blind your view to the rest of your options for your team build. So I would be mindful how many times, if you start building constantly with primes, I would definitely say just stop for a couple of weeks and look at the diversity of everything else, and then start building your team and then add the prime. Don't make the mistake that I did.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and that's one of the things that makes primes a super weird thing. They range in the gamut of Thor the Destroyer all the way down to Moira McTaggart in points. So if you're going to base your team around a prime, it has to be one of the big point ones, and that's kind of where your decision making starts and ends around. But then if you start around a different character or you start to build around another strategy, that's when a prime can accidentally find its way into your team, like the red leader. Right?
Yeah.
So I always try to tell players to start how you want to play heroclix. Like, how do you feel like you want to play the game of heroclix? How are you comfortable playing it? Start there, and then see where the prime kind of finds you in that sense. If you're the type of guy, it's like, I want a big guy, I want to surround him with a lot of goods and, make him the focus of things. Mm-hmm. You have a couple options in that outside of the primes. But, look at the primes that we do have available and then, work around that. But this is like team building 101 in general. It's like, how are you going to start? How do you want to build? And that can kind of inform your decision on a prime. I personally always add primes to my team last or in the midst of building because I can see an improvement on my team from them. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of primes are also really good at is wearing more than one hat. If I can get out of one character the same thing that I can get paying less and, putting a single prime on, super awesome. Because, like, Nighthawk Prime is an example of, it helps me deal with everything that gets bigger in the game, which, at the time he came out was everything. Yeah. Right? And then he also adds Outwit, right? So he does have a double-edged sword. He also attracts shots and is hard to target because, if you put guys next to him, his shape change gets great. Right? So, like, he's kind of got a three-edged sword. It's like he's a meaty target that people want out of the way so that they can make your teams functional. They're going to overcommit to him, and then he's going to shape change out of it most of the time because you have a couple friends nearby. He's hard to hit. And then he's going to add Outwit because you expose yourself to him. So he kind of wears three hats in that sense. Right?
Yeah.
And, it's always hard to... take a figure and say, I need this all three eggs in this basket so that I can spread out and diversify more. But that's what a lot of primes are really capable of helping out with, So,
yeah. Well, and even more, I would definitely say is when we're even expanding that to the title characters, I can't purely say like copy and paste, but a lot of it applies. But the biggest thing I look at with the title characters is if they die, does that liability completely lose me the game?
Right, yeah. Because their liability is... They have a liability. All of them have a liability. Primes don't all come with liabilities. I think the only one that had a notable liability was Abin Sur, and that's if you tried to probability control an attack away from him. Well, okay, the next one's going to be a little easier. Sorry. Right?
Yeah, I forgot about Abin Sur's whole thing. I think it was like he was grounded, and all I remember when I bought Abin Sur's, number one, I finally got this construct, thank God.
The wall.
And the wall. I think it was the Green Lantern wall. And then after that, it was like, he's 50 points. I'm going to play him. And then I don't even remember half my games after that. And sadly, I broke his head off. Yeah, it's. I think it's still in the box, but his head came off. So, yeah.
But back in the day, he was. If you actually look at that dial, that is what we started with. At one point in the conversation, is that was a great dial for 50 points that had a minor downside. When you commit to a title character, you're already committing to having to make sure that they work, and then you have to commit to, if this guy dies, am I going to lose? And, a lot of the newer cases, probably going to lose unless you've done a ton of damage, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really like the major case, is that I feel with the title characters, you're stuck trying to make synergy with the title characters while at the same time having some level of insurance with the title characters.
Yeah.
I think this is an unintended consequence, and I think it's primarily the fact just because Penguin exists. But I've seen a lot of title character play in Constructed just be, I'm going to chill back, punch Penguin, slap him around, move around the loyalty tokens, and that's really it until I get my big power off. And then once that happens, then I'm going to go and start playing. Have you started to see that as well with the tile characters, or is that just something more of I'm more seeing?
I'm actually guilty of it. 100% part of the problem in that case. That's how I use my Harley a lot. At one point, I was attempting a massive Pog strategy involving Double Dinosaur and Harley with a penguin in the back, and the other penguin as well, the one that gives you the penguin tokens.
Yeah.
It was just a massive bystander tokens that also had a round table, of course, a teleporter because legality.
Yeah.
And then they moved everything to postmodern cuts. So I'm off of that team. But all I would do is sit there, add the plot point token, perplex up something's defense just in case somebody came too close, and use safety with the penguin, created a penguin token, moved it all the way up because nonsense, and did damage with that. For a good half of the game, the mega penguin token was going across the board and with this strategy and attacking other things. This was only practice. I never got to bring this into tournaments. So
you need to learn the power of the Tyrannoids.
Oh, I know the power of the Tyrannoids. I brought the Tyrannoids out in a battle royale. I don't know if you're paying attention or if you saw me, Tom, Mike, and Jay play a battle royale at the Rocktober. But if you were in the room, you heard us.
Man, Tyrannoids, buddy. Yeah, Tyrannoids are the gift that you keep giving to piss off your opponent.
Yeah.
Brief note on Tyrannoids. All right, so I was playing on the Speakeasy map because it reasons. We'll just leave it at that. And so one of my local players, he didn't really just rush me. So he was trying to move up all careful and shoot. So I was like, well, I'm up on the stage and there's a wall and there's a platform. So you don't have any improved targeting nor his elevation. So I'm just going to sit back and make Tyrannoids. And I had like Carnage, Tyrannoids, and something else. So I just started spacing the Tyrannoids so that he couldn't like move up. And he had to like move into a Tyrannoid and stop. And so, like, after, 8 or 10 breakaways, he finally gets close enough to do something. And so, I think he kills a Pog because he has to. Following turn, Colossal Retaliate, locking him down with the Carnage Pog. Sidestep, pick up my Tyrannus, and move. And so, he had to then deal with the Tyrannoid. I mean, with the Tyrannoids plus the Carnage Pog. He wasn't happy.
No.
But yeah, Tyrannus, he gives the gifts of Tyrannoids.
My only complaint about Tyrannus is that his Tyrannoids aren't autonomous or their actions count.
Yes, they're
minor
also
gripe.
punks too in their stats. Yeah. But plasticity, just and decent move.
Yeah,
that's all you need. Like I use Tyrannus with the penguin. And you use the Tyrannoids to carry the penguins, and then the penguins sidestep.
Yeah,
and it's an easy way to like surprise people, and then they can't just shoot down your penguin Pogs real easily because the Tyrannoids are standard size, and people forget that too. It's like they're standard size. Like the little goblins are going to grab to your legs and stuff and bring you down. All right, so. Wrapping it up, if you had an advice for game design going forward to make primes more unique and title characters more unique, what would you tell game design? Because they don't listen to this show.
So I can say whatever I want.
You can say whatever you want. They don't pay attention to me. They don't know who I am. You know, I'm not the juggernaut.
I do have to say, for the most part, you're right. Like, primes have got to start, especially lately, they've become more like characters we're already familiar with. Like you said, we had the Jakeem Thunder, who was just, Super Scroll Light. Even when I say the Red Leader, he's just a better Perplexer to a certain degree. He's still not super unique. Odin the Destroyer is just a big old character. And they kind of have to look at it and say, is is this worth a prime? Why am I making this a prime? I think that question has to start coming up a little bit more often, instead of just, I feel like there might be something to do with the molds. I might be talking out of my rear end, but something to do with the molds probably is why the primes are getting...
It has to do with the molds and remolding? Gosh, who would have thought of that?
Yeah, right?
I don't know. But yeah,
I will never overcredit them with they have to keep their costs somehow, and probably somewhere in the... Anyway, beyond that, they do have to put a little bit more consideration when they say, why am I making this a prime? Or, for that matter, get unique with the posing. They got... Every so often, it's a rename. Other times, it's like Dr. Voodoo, Brother Voodoo. It's still kind of the same character, different states. You can get a little bit better than that. I mean, if you're able to tell me I got Ms. Marvel and Alara in the same set, but the same model, not primes to each other, you can do better.
Yeah.
You've sold me that you can do better. I feel like we may just have hit a point once again, like we were in the pre-card era, where everything under the sun's been done, and they might not have anything left to come up with. That might be the case, but there might be, it might be time to get a little bit more creative with our power combinations, or a little bit more creative with our traits. If I was to send them, my advice somehow, some way, and that advice is worth listening to, is a little bit more in as far as making these guys different, or just drop the mechanic altogether. I mean, a couple sets have survived without it. Maybe it's time to look at it and say, okay, this was cool, we're done.
Ooh, that's a cold-blooded statement on that one.
You know what? It wouldn't be the first thing they dropped. We're about to lose. We're gonna have one resource in the next modern meta, right?
I don't even want to call it a resource, but
I don't want to either. But technically, it is.
Oh man. Okay. Side confession.
Technically, a hot dog's a sandwich too. So
hold up. This is my confession. Okay. I was looking at Shifted Focus Punisher.
Yeah.
And for a brief moment, I was asking myself, hey, what would happen if I added the surveillance device? And I legit was looking at the surveillance device and the riot shield, and eventually I was looking at Molotov cocktails, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so fun! And then I'm like, oh.
And then you put the bottle down?
Yeah. I let the pipe grow cold and came to myself. But yeah, we do have one resource, and trust me, I've had a lot of people in Phoenix Nest try to build with that one resource, and it's yet to happen.
Yeah, but I want to say PJ will make anything work if it's going to work. He couldn't make the Punisher band work. He admitted he couldn't make it work. If PJ can't do it, it can't be done unless George has some kind of plan.
See, now I'll give you that one. I'll straight give you that one. And the main reason I say that is I was one talking with PJ on that. and I like when I tell you, like, we had a lot of people in Phoenix that's working on it. I at least had 3 people working on that problem, and we could not figure it out. And the worst part about it is, like, and I'm mainly saying this from a competitive play perspective, of like, you're trying to win like a Rocktober, or you're trying to win a Super Q. Not like, hey, I came in and I raffle stomp local play. Like that, we figured that out. That's not a problem. But when you start saying, like, here's a competitive team for a major event, then you're like, oh gosh, I can't get it to work. Go ahead.
No. I mean, that's kind of where we are. As we were saying, this is the last resource in the game, right? And this is just another mechanic that's kind of going by the wayside. Relics are gone, resources are gone. I mean, why does the Prime exist? That's what they have to ask themselves. And I'm not being a jerk when I say maybe it's time to retire the mechanic. It's time for them to introspectively look at it and say, are we doing the right thing by continuing this mechanic?
And I think I hate to say it like this, how they unveil the mechanic and use the mechanic, I feel the Prime is more of a rarity than it is a mechanic.
I do not disagree.
And yeah. So, of course, this is the end of the show, and I'm going to end off with this final question for Jason. What do you think of Avengers Infinity so far?
I want more space in my apartment, first of all, because damn, that's a lot of big things.
I thought you had a house.
No. I have a 2-level apartment. So
okay.
It's house-like, but it is definitely not a house. No. Where I sit right now on Avengers Infinity is it kind of reminds me of Supernova 2.0.
Ooh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, it's a lot of really weird spacey things from comics I don't necessarily read, but it always yields a lot of fun. I'm seeing a lot of higher points come back into the game, so I feel like it could end up being the set we build around with all this stuff that we've been given, these little scraps that we've been given for the years before it. Mm-hmm. So that's my thoughts sit on. It's going to take up a lot of space because of all the big stuff. But there's also a lot of big points, and this is going to be the coolest looking set in Sealed. I don't care what anybody says. When you go to a Sealed game and you see a giant in the middle of the table, you're just a passerby like, what is going on there? There's like giant action figures on the table and little things. What is going on in that room? It's going to draw some eyes to the game.
Did you ever play the World of Warcraft like tabletop game?
The board game?
They had it was sort of like Mage Knight.
Yeah. Sort of like Mage Knight.
I think it was sort of like Mage Knight. But anyway, I remember their collectibles, and they were about that size of some of these figures.
Oh.
And I was like, oh man, those are huge. Who's ever going to play with those? It's like, I got my little heroclix. I can carry hundreds of those. But now it's like, oh, I'm about to be one of those guys now.
I mean, we've been getting that way with Colossal Retaliation. Let's not kid ourselves, right?
No, okay. I will also admit, like, the days, my venue knows the days that I've just become lazy, is the day that I just show with a big bag and I just start unloading Colossals. And I'm like, this is at 150, this is at 25, this is at 25, this is at 100. I'm done. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, 2 Colossal Retaliators, 2 main guys. It's like, so you have 2 Sinestros, another Sinestro that's 150 and just one random 100-point guy. Yep, that's pretty much my team. Yeah. Like, okay, this is going to be an interesting night. But yeah. All right, so go ahead and give your shout-outs, even though I guess 99.9% of everybody knows where you come from.
Well, I am at youtube.com/marriedwithclicks. You can check out the metal ad every Monday. I'm not there as frequently as I used to be. I'm a little busy at work, but I swear I'll get there soon. Amber, I'm still regularly releasing Metafix episodes, so Amber, I love her dearly, and she gets that stuff up. And yeah, just keep your eyes on that YouTube channel. It's where all our stuff comes from. And we also have a Patreon if you want to check that out and you're interested in the channel. You can join us on a chat once a month. And I like to chit-chat with those who love to open our wallets to us.
Yeah, definitely give to them. They're a pretty good show. They have my boy PJ on there. So
not anymore. He's got work shifts on Mondays now.
Well,
we just lost him.
Well, when he gets work back, shifting, that's his business. We'll talk about that later. But he has a nice job, working for a great company. But he has variable work schedules depending on need, and so, I call him on the weekends, and I'm like, please don't be asleep. Just don't be asleep.
You always feel guilty if you woke somebody up. I've messaged him once on Facebook saying, "You available for the show?" at like 3 PM. He's like, "Oh yeah, I just woke up. Yeah, I should be good.
Yeah. Like, he's a guy where I'm like, I was exhausted at the end of the tournament. I'm like, yep, there we go. Yeah, that's fine. There's no rebuttal or qualms for me. So anyway, all right. So of course, like always, you can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me, man, if you go to the two-dimensional plane of 3957B X92, there's a magical tree that goes there and grows there that whispers all the things that you really feel about yourself but won't admit. Could be depressing or really awesome. I don't know. I can't get there. But my Twitter does. My Twitter gets around. My Twitter is awesome. So because YouTube may not notify you of a new Starting Over podcast, not Twitter. YouTube may not let you know of a new Starting Over podcast. Twitter loves me. So follow me on Twitter. That's how you're guaranteed to know when a new show is up. Because YouTube talks to Twitter. Twitter talks to everybody. YouTube doesn't talk to everybody. Twitter talks to everybody. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you wish to opine, keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Let me know what you think about Infinity War. What do you think about the Scott Porter videos? I think he is definitely the grand professional of heroclix broadcasting, because he can refuse to be salty professionally. Like, I'm gonna say this. I wasn't planning on saying this. I can see like him holding back some nerd rage during every one of those things. Every one of those things. And then he hits it with that right amount of optimism and professionalism. And then at the end, he sort of drops that one grain of salt. Like this time it was like, I sort of wish there was Fantastic Four, but I know that can't happen. And during What If, it's like, I'm looking forward to some, and you see at the beginning of the video, it's like, I'm looking forward to some X-Men. I'm looking forward to some wacky stuff. And then he's just like, oh.
What did I just open?
Oh. This is
look, another Daredevil.
Yeah, this is what we have, guys. So, Scott Porter, if you ever listen to this, you are the true most professionalist dude in the realm of heroclix broadcasting, because I couldn't do it, homie. And that's why I don't get a brick of these things anymore. Ever. I've never gotten a brick, a case of nothing. And I don't ever think I probably will from WizKids, because I'm a bitter old man sometimes. But yeah, you can donate to me at startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. That has my eBay linked in there. And I'm not my eBay, my PayPal. I've been dealing with eBay a lot lately. They don't get your account hacked by people in other countries. Don't get your eBay hacked by people in other countries that speak Russian. Like, for real. All right, that's it. Thank you all for listening. And remember, we all have to start over sometime.